Hello, my name is Lucas, and today we are going to be going over some of the fundamentals of 2D arrays. As seen before, within 1D arrays in Java, arrays can store many items of the same type, whether this be an integer, double, string, or boolean. Now you can store these items within two-dimensional arrays. And two-dimensional arrays are arrays that have both rows and columns. A row has horizontal elements, and a column has vertical elements. Now, similar to one-dimensional arrays, the length of two-dimensional arrays is also fixed. Two-dimensional arrays are especially useful when the data is naturally... Sorry, that was my house director. So, two-dimensional arrays are especially useful when the data is naturally organized in rows and columns, like in a spreadsheet, bingo, battleship, theater seats, classroom seats, or picture. Java actually stores two-dimensional arrays as arrays of arrays or arrays within arrays, and the typical way to do this is to store all the data for the first row, followed by all the data for the second row, and so on. Now this is called row major order, where each element of the outer array has a reference to each of the inner array. As seen in this picture, we have a 2D array that has three rows and 7 columns, and as we've learned before, the array indices start at 0 and at the length minus 1. Now we're gonna look at how to declare different 2D arrays within Java, and we're gonna see the similarities between declaring 2D arrays and 1D arrays. So as you can see here, the first way to declare a 2D array is by first of all declaring the type of array, so integer, string, boolean, or double, and then using the double square brackets indicating that it's a 2D array, and then the variable name, and then you set that equal to a new integer of 2D array with the number of rows in the first double square bracket and the number of columns in the second double square bracket. So as you can see within this declaration, we are basically making the 2D array multiples, a 2D array with 4 rows and 2 columns. And the same thing goes with the string 2D array, and within this string 2D array we were making grid, a 2D array with 3 rows and 3 columns. Now in Java you can't you cannot do this where you leave both double square brackets empty. However, you can only put in the value of the first square brackets indicating the rows, and in this example you can see that the 2D array right has 2 rows and an unknown amount of columns. Now, I actually find this way of declaring 2D arrays quite tedious, seeing as when you're declaring the actual array, you get the number of rows and the number of columns. However, the elements in these rows and columns get an automatic value of 0. For ints, you get a 0, and then for strings, you get a string of null at each element, and for doubles, you get a 0.0. So this means that you have to manually input the values at each element, and you can do this by doing the 2D array at the specific index, and then you assign it a value. In this case, we're assigning multiples of index 3 at 1, a value of 1. Now, a simple way and common way that I use it is this way, where you have the same declaration, but it equals the actual array, and you actually put in the array. Now from this one line, you declare the 2D array variable, you give it a set amount of rows and columns, and you give each element within these rows and columns a value. And as you can see, this using this syntax would be the same thing as this in terms of the rows. However, within the new int 2 at 2, there would be the value of the elements would all be 0. And if we go back to this picture, a 2D array with 3 rows and 7 columns would have these values of elements and elements at of values 0. Now we're going to talk about printing elements within a 2D array. You can print specific elements, and you can print all of the elements. First of all, we will talk about printing specific elements. And if we're given an array here of this array, then we can print the element at the index at certain indexes by just using the system.out.println and then specify which index / element you want it to print, and then it simply just prints out the value at that index or element. And then, as I went over quickly earlier with the assigning variables to the this way of declaring two-dimensional arrays, you must access particular elements in the 2D array. And you can do this by just doing the array variable at the certain index, and then you can change the variable. And as we can see here, by using the value of, or the variable array r 2D array at 2, we are changing the element at row 3, column 3, which in this case is this element, to 2. And then in order to print print the all of the elements within an array, you can do it I like to do it in 2 different ways, depending on the situation. In both ways, you have to run through all of the elements within the array and all the indexes within the array and then print those out. And we do this by using 2 for loops. And the first for loop is for the rows, and the second for loop is for the columns, i.e. the columns that align with the certain row number. So for the first for loop, we know that I must start at 0 and then end at before array length, meaning the number of rows within the array, and then I increases each time the for loop is loops. And then for this one, j equals 0 is the column, and then we do j, and j ends when j is j must be less than array at the specific row I dot length, and then you print out that specific index or element at j. And if we run this, we print out all the values of r up here on one line, and then we can also print out those values on the same line by using system.out.print instead of print line, so that it prints on the same same line. And then also after the for loop runs for the column, it skips the line with this print statement. As you can see, if we run this, we actually get the different columns of the array. So, thank you. That is all that I have for you today. I hope this was helpful. Goodbye.